So welcome to the exhibition exchange, Brian Roberts and the Hatchie National Wildlife Refuge. Brian is the Wildlife Refuge Manager for the Hatchie National Wildlife Refuge with the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. As a refuge manager, his primary duties include coordinating and executing refuge operations and maintenance, education, public use, and habitat restoration. A native of Chattanooga, Brian grew up exploring the outdoors, camping with his family, backpacking, as well as hunting and fishing in local woods and streams. Brian knew he wanted a career where he could incorporate his passion for nature and conservation with his daily job. He received his bachelor's of science in forestry with a minor in wildlife management at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. Throughout his career, he has worked in various realms of forestry and wildlife management. Brian considers himself fortunate to have a career that is fulfilling both professionally and personally. So without further ado, I'm going to hand the virtual mic over to Brian. Welcome, and thank you so much for talking tonight.
Thank you, guys. And thank you guys for being here and having me. It's a great privilege and honor to spend this evening with you. It's been a beautiful day in West Tennessee. The sun's shining, and O'Neill Lake. I'm sorry you guys may not be able to see it out your window, but I can, and it's beautiful this evening, and we've got a few people walking around and enjoying the walk around the lake. But just an introduction to Hatchie National Wildlife Refuge, and what I'm really going to be talking to you comes from our comprehensive conservation plan, and that's available to everybody, a member of the public. I'll show you that here after our talk, and it's basically what guides us, what the refuge was established for, and our goals and objectives, and really the importance of Hatchie and the National Wildlife Refuge and the Hatchie River and its importance and the uniqueness of the ecosystems here. So Hatchie National Wildlife Refuge was established in November the 16th, 1964, and we celebrated our 50th year in 2014, and we look forward to many more. The purchase of which Hatchie Refuge was established is for use as an inviolate sanctuary for migratory birds. And it was established through the authority of the Migratory Bird Conservation Act. Hatchie National Wildlife Refuge is located in Haywood County. Haywood County has a population of around 17,500. And the refuge is located on 23.5 miles of the Hatchie River. Our north boundary lies along the Hatchie River. The refuge is approximately 55 miles northeast of the metropolitan Memphis area, with a population of 1.3 million people, and 30 miles west of Jackson with a approximately population of around 100,000, which that places the refuge within easy access of more than 1.5 million people throughout West Tennessee. Now, Hatchie National Wildlife Refuge currently encompasses 11,556 acres. We have around 9,700 acres of bottomland hardwood forest. That includes black willow trees, cottonwoods, overcup oaks, nutto oaks, ash trees, hackberry, pecans, sweet gum, hickories, water oaks, and bald cypress. We have around 382 acres of upland forest, which you'll find your typical upland trees, hardwoods, yellow poplar, red oaks, the white oaks, cedars, hickory, and ash. And then we also have around 930 acres of agricultural areas that we use for cooperative farming, and our moist soil impoundments. The moist soil includes smartweeds, sedges, rushes, and grasses, broadleafs, and millets. Now, our cooperative farmer, they farm between 400 and so acres of that, and it may be in corn, soybeans, or milo. I'll get to that a little bit more, but and then we have other areas, about 500 acres of other, which is scrub shrub, emergent marsh, the giant cane, open water, and grasslands. So the Hatchie River is very unique. It's considered a state scenic river, and the Hatchie River begins in northern Mississippi, and it becomes a moderately large, slow-moving, and naturally muddy river as it flows through western Tennessee. And it eventually emptying into the Mississippi River. Unlike most Mississippi River tributaries that have been channelized and levees constructed for flood control, the Hatchie River remains the longest continuous stretch of naturally meandering river in the lower Mississippi Valley. And that's what really brings the uniqueness and the specialness of the Hatchie River and this bottomland hardwood ecosystem. So as a result, the Hatchie River and its watersheds remain one of the best examples of a naturally operating ecosystem. The Hatchie River drains a watershed of nearly 1.6 million acres, and its floodwaters continue to support naturally functioning aquatic and wetland ecotypes, along with vast tracts of bottomland hardwood forest. These intact habitats are generally thought to support some of the richest plant and animal communities found in the upper East Gulf ecoregion and contain more than 100 species of fish, 35 species of mussels, and approximately 250 species of birds. Now, I'm gonna get a drink of water right quick. Now, what is our Refuge Vision? The Refuge Vision is to protect and enhance an excellent example of a fully functioning river-driven bottomland hardwood ecosystem that supplies critical habitat needs for wintering waterfowl and other migratory birds, as well as a host of other fish and wildlife species, and provides refuge visitors with the opportunity to learn the value of this unique and diminishing habitat. So with our vision, we take and we develop goals. So our following goals were developed in keeping with that vision for the refuge and purposes for which the refuge was established. Goal number 1, waterfowl. Provide a complex of managed wintering and migration habitats for waterfowl that support the population goals and objectives established in a North American waterfowl management plan. And that brings in all partners from Canada, Mexico, and even all throughout the United States. And then also the Lower Mississippi Valley Joint Venture Plan and the West Tennessee Wildlife Refuge's Conservation Plan. Now, through that, we establish objectives. And through the management of the existing refuge lands, we are looking to support 5.4 million duck use days and 500,000 goose use days annually. And that's based on a 110-day wintering the water. We put water on impoundments, so that's a 110-day wintering period, in addition to a year-round habitat for resident wood ducks. So basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to feed 50,000 ducks per day for 110 days during that wintering period. And that leads to goal number 2, which is endangered and threatened species. Protect, manage, and enhance refuge habitats in a manner that will sustain and increase the species populations. So I talked about the 11,556 acres of existing refuge lands. We're looking to enhance, restore, protect, and manage imperiled species habitat using the appropriate conservation tools. Goal number 3, migratory land birds. So provide a complex of habitats which meets the breeding, migration, and wintering needs of the species of management concern. And that's identified in the goals and objectives of the Partners in Flight program and the plan, and our also West Tennessee Refuge's Conservation Plan. Goal number 4, shorebirds and waterbirds. We want to provide a complex of managed habitats for shorebirds and waterbirds during critical periods throughout the year to increase the bird use on the refuge and to develop a traditional use site. We do that through providing a minimum of 100 acres of shorebird habitat during the spring migration, which we've just kind of seen the end of it. We still have some shorebirds coming through, but we do that through mud flats, drawing water down at certain times, and that increases the use, their access to invertebrates and things inside the mud, bugs, where it means small fish, tadpoles, and so forth. And then 10 acres of during the fall migration when they're heading back south, and a minimum of 10 acres of waterbird habitat during the summer in the managed impounded wetlands. We have, some that'll come through and hang out and spend the summer here. Goal number 5, we have aquatic resources. Maintain and improve aquatic habitat quantity, quality, and diversity to sustain and or increase population levels of aquatic resources on the refuge. Now, that also too, we conserve, restore, and manage up to almost 300 acres of open water wetlands. That includes the lakes, the sloughs, and the side channels, and the oxbow lakes that the river naturally meandering naturally creates and takes away. And also through that, with the 9,700 acres of seasonally flooded bottomland hardwood forest to provide resting, foraging, and breeding habitats for the resident migratory wetland dependent wildlife species. But it's also, right now, the refuge is underwater. We've got most of our bottomland hardwoods are underwater through the natural flooding regime, spring flooding. But that also gives room for the fish to spread out and to go after our native fish species, going after invertebrates. And also, but it also provides opportunities for recreational harvest of selected species on the refuge. Goal number 6, resident wildlife. Provide a complex of habitats suitable for a wide range of resident wildlife, including mammals, birds, amphibians, reptiles, and while we're achieving habitat management objectives and biological integrity with other native flora and fauna. Goal number 7, this one's very important to this local community and Haywood County and even West Tennessee, public use. We're going to enhance public use of the refuge through development of appropriate and compatible programs of wildlife-dependent recreation. That's very key. Wildlife-dependent recreation and education interpretation that is consistent with the National Wildlife Refuge System Improvement Act of 1997. And that will promote an understanding of the lower river valley ecosystem as well. So what we're doing, and we call this wildlife-dependent recreation public use, that includes 6 designated high priority for the National Wildlife Refuges. That includes hunting, fishing, wildlife observation, wildlife photography, environmental education, and interpretation. We're going to do that throughout our entire 11,556 acres of refuge lands and waters. Goal number 8, administration and operation. We're going to ensure that the present and future operational administration and personnel objectives are achieved in order to meet those goals and objectives for refuge habitats, fish, and wildlife populations, and through land conservation and visitor services. Now, how are we going to do that? One of the objectives is that's to provide adequate facilities and the personnel and the training and the equipment necessary to accomplish a comprehensive refuge management program. Goal number 9 is land protection and conservation. We're going to protect natural and cultural resources through partnerships. And through those partnerships, we're going to do that in accordance with federal and state historic preservation legislation and regulations. Now, I talked a little bit about the habitat types that we have on the refuge, the bottomland hardwoods, the upland forest, the agriculture and the moist soil, and the open water and the grasslands. Now, through the shorebirds and the water birds, we're looking at those emergent marshes. We're looking at the moist soil units. We'll leave water on longer and throughout this time of year until the end of May in order to create that ecosystem and that pocket for those shorebirds and water birds. And then we have the grasslands, which were, the resident wildlife, our quail and things that they need those grasses and the turkeys in order to find nesting cover and feeding and escape cover. And I talked a little bit about our agriculture program. We do have a cooperative farmer, farms around 400 acres or so. And we use that program to plant corn, soybean, and milo. And that helps us to plant our crops that we leave in our waterfowl impoundments for the migrating waterfowl, geese, and the ducks, and even shorebirds and so forth. So we use that program in order to help us to meet the need to give waterfowl crops. Now, we'll go back just a little bit and we talk about what's the importance of crops for waterfowl. And what it is there was about 25 million acres of Mississippi bottomlands that have been converted to agriculture or other uses. So we've lost those bottomland hardwoods throughout the Mississippi Valley. And we use those crops to replace that loss, to kind of offset. We never will be able to offset it completely, but the corn and the milo and things of that, they bring back kind of a substitute for the acorns and stuff that we lost during development over the years. So with that, our yearly average, every year we have 3,400 acres of waterfowl sanctuary. These areas of the refuges, we close those on November the 15th, and we do not allow any public access until March 15th. These areas are mostly where our waterfowl impoundments are, but most of that is actually river flooded bottomland hardwoods. We want to keep that flooded bottomland hardwood system for the waterfowl to be able to use throughout the wintering period. We don't want them disturbed. And what we're looking for is for those waterfowl that are migrating to be able to stop. We want them to be able to rest. We want them to be able to feed. And then we want them to be able to go on to the next stop further south as they migrate. So how many crops are we planting? We shoot for about 150 acres of corn. And that's kind of our main staple. That's kind of our go-to. It's a high energy crop. They use it to, like I said, replacing the acorn loss. That when it gets really cold, they'll switch off and they'll start eating the corn because it's that high calorie food for them. This year, we're in this growing season, we're looking to plant 20 acres of milo. We're going to kind of mix it up a little bit and give them kind of a buffet of food for them to choose from. We're also looking at about 60 acres of rice, and we're going to push in about 20 acres of sunflowers and probably about 25 to 50 acres of millet. And then we also will plant some of once our cooperative farmer gets the crops out, we'll go back over that and plant around 100 acres of winter wheat for green forage for geese and so forth. And that's kind of where we're headed with our crops this year. And hopefully it'll dry out. And we're getting some good weather now. We're getting some warmer weather. We're getting some sunshine. The river's actually dropping, so we're able to get a lot of our water moved out of our waterfowl impoundments. And that'll enable us to get in there and work the ground and to plant these crops in for coming up fall. Infrastructure, I think this is very important. And the Fish and Wildlife Service over the years has really pushed infrastructure. We've established roads here. We've got a visitor contact station, which also serves as refuge headquarters. O'Neill Lake, we've got fishing lakes. We've got a new maintenance facility that was constructed in 2017 that enables us to work on our equipment during the rainy days and the off days that we can't get out, or the winter. We keep our equipment established. We've got wonderful equipment, and that helps us to meet our conservation goals. We have some pole sheds where we store this equipment. So we're on an 18-year replacement cycle, so we have to take care of our equipment. We have to use it wisely. We have to keep it maintained, oil changed and everything. But we also want to store them in, keep them out of the weather and the sunshine just to prolong their life. We have 8.62 miles of levees. And we also have around 43 miles of roads to maintain, the gravel roads. And they take a lot of abuse through the river coming in and out, and we have to maintain those. We also have 21 parking lots. We have 9 bridges we have to maintain, inspect every couple of years. We have 19 boat ramps. We have 2 of those on the Hatchie River that members of the public, hunters, fishermen, sightseers, bird watchers can access the Hatchie River. And that would be either the Big Eddy boat ramp and also the Highway 76 boat ramp. We have 54 water control structures that we have to maintain, that we use to move water throughout the waterfowl impoundments. And we move water from water retention lakes into the waterfowl impoundments. But we also use those to help with drainage from off refuge through the refuge. We're part of the system. We're part of, filtering that water before it gets to the Hatchie River, so the Hatchie River stays healthy and productive. So we have to maintain those water control structures, keep the water moving through the system, as we say. We have 4 wells. In very dry years, we'll have to use these wells to pump up our waterfowl impoundments. That way we have water to be able to put on our crops for the ducks. Fishing areas, we have 18 fishing lakes, which is great. And every one of those has a boat ramp on that the public can use. We've got about 4.7 miles of birding trails and hunter access trails. So that's just some of the infrastructure that goes on. And visitation, we approximate around 66,000 visitors throughout the year that actually stop or hunt or bird and or pass through. The interstate, we're all fortunate through here. The Haywood County has Interstate 40, but that pushes about 36,000 vehicles passing through this refuge daily. And we have signs on the interstate. We're at least trying to get people to say, hey, we're passing through a refuge, or just to bring awareness. But so that's a lot of folks passing through Haywood County and Hatchie National Wildlife Refuge. We've been featured in Field and Stream, March 2018, about public access hunting areas, archery. So we do have that wildlife dependent recreation of hunting. We're open pretty much a lot to the state seasons for all species. Now, current issues. What's going on at the refuge? What have you got that's really pressing? From a management standpoint, it would be that we only have 2 current full-time permanent staff. We normally have around 5 to 7. Myself, the refuge manager, and then we just hired, and Bob Salmon started a couple of weeks ago. He's the new administrative assistant. He'll help out here and maintain the contact station for visitors coming in and provide information to visitors. But he'll also help out administrative in terms of helping with the operation of the refuge, just keeping up with administrative type stuff. He's going to be a great asset. Now, we've had equipment operators retire. We still have those vacant positions, and hopefully soon. They've been vacant for about 3 or 4 years now, but hopefully I'm looking forward to, I'm very hopeful that they'll get filled pretty soon. I'm fortunate. Another refuge is actually allowing one of their equipment operators to come here to help me with the equipment in terms of maintaining and to do general maintenance throughout the refuge. Also, we'll have a temporary tractor operator this summer that will help keep the grass cut. We have a lot of grass and levees and roads that have to be maintained. And this individual will come in for about 6 months. I've been fortunate this past winter. I've had a volunteer couple. They spent 6 months here throughout the winter helping do odd and end jobs that they did a great job, and they really helped out in a lot of ways. Also, we have a program through University of Tennessee Martin. We have 2 interns from the University of Tennessee Martin Wildlife Program, and they'll spend 12 weeks here learning what it's like to work on a refuge and really just the whole aspects of what does it take to make a whether it's a wildlife refuge or a wildlife management area, if they should pursue those careers, what does it take to make it work? And then we also have a pathways program intern that'll be in the summer. This individual will be coming out of the University of Tennessee Knoxville wildlife program. So there's a lot of opportunities, and I'm fortunate, even though I can't fill some of my permanent positions, I do have a lot of temporary folks coming in that are excited and that really help out during our busy time of year of getting our crops in and getting roads maintained and grass cut and water control structures and boat ramps and all those infrastructure things maintained. So what really pushes Hatchie in terms, that's one of the main issues, but the biggest conservation issue, we have excessive sedimentation from eroding tributary systems. That's one of the primary threats to Hatchie. The sediments, unfortunately, we have a lot of development around us, and we have to have those developments. We have to have the agricultural fields. We have to, as a society, have those. But with that, sometimes you get sediments that wash off and they pass through what we call the system here. And Hatchie catches a lot of that sedimentation. Now, over the years, the sedimentation has gotten a little bit more. We have a lot of pressure on our agricultural fields to produce crops for the world, and that's understandable. But what that does is we have pressure on these bottomland hardwood systems with sedimentation. Sedimentation, once it comes through the refuge, it hits the forest, the water slows down, which is the natural process of it. But it also slows the water down, and then the sedimentation settles on the refuge. In some areas, it's very excessive, and that excessive sedimentation will actually kill bottomland hardwood forest. So we kind of work through partnerships and work through other programs to help us with those sedimentation issues, and just to kind of use Hatchie. The bottomland hardwood system it's meant to filter the water before it gets to the Hatchie River and protect that river. If the sedimentation should hit the river, the Hatchie River, then a lot of areas it could change the direction of the river. It could also alter it out of its natural banks and its meandering, and you get these sedimentation shoals and plugs and things that will affect fish and aquatic species. So when we have another issue that's kind of popped up, I know a lot of folks are familiar with it, is the chronic wasting disease, and it's affecting white-tailed deer. We're constantly monitoring that. We have had just one positive case on the refuge, which we're fortunate, but we're continuing to monitor and test and ask the public to help us during the hunting seasons to help turn in those samples so we can monitor and best manage our white-tailed deer. Well, I guess with that, I'm going to share a few things on the excuse me for just a second, but we'll share a few websites. I want to show you our website and then where you can find some more information. Let me find out. And I pulled a lot of this information from our habitat conservation management plan. Let's see here, share screen. Hopefully I'll do this correctly. Did that bring up the Hatchie National Wildlife Refuge comprehensive conservation plan?
You were all good. Yeah, looks great.
Okay, this, if you want to download a copy of this, it's 164 pages. It's got a lot of information in it. It also talks about species found on the refuge, whether they're common, uncommon, rare, or abundant. But this one is dated back to April 2006. It's on a 15-year plan. We're updating this plan this year, and it's got a lot of great information in it. It's our guide. And it's been public reviewed and publicly commented on. And like I said, this one dates back to April 2006. And also on there, you can see the table of contents. It's got a lot of the background, refuge overview, the purpose, and even through the planning process and the management direction, the goals that I stated there. And it breaks it down into the objectives. Let's see. Excuse me for 1 second. This is our website. It's got a lot of good information on it. And one thing I wanted to point out on it, it's a great guide if you should come. It's our public use regulations brochure. And what it is, it talks about our hunting seasons and what to expect and areas of, it's got the map on it, which helps you with the roads and the boat ramps and the walking trails and the waterfowl hunting area. We do allow waterfowl hunting on this far east end of the Big Eddy. And this is in the darker colors, you'll see our waterfowl sanctuaries that are closed from November the 15th to March 15th. And that is governed by how the refuge was established through the Migratory Bird Stamp Act and how the refuge was established. Let me see here. Also, for some more information, you can look us up on our Facebook page. This is run by our park ranger out of our Reelfoot office. A lot of good information, a lot of goings on just through daily. And we'll post pictures and videos that we see throughout if we see something unique or something we want to share with the public. Currently, the monarch butterflies are going through their process this spring, and she's captured some eggs and put them inside and let them develop throughout the time. We also have a Friends of West Tennessee National Wildlife Refuges. It's a friends group, and members of the public can join it. It's basically advocates and partners in a lot of things that we do. They're friends of our refuge, and they push issues and help with events and things throughout the year. Well, with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'll open it up to any questions.
Awesome. Well, Brian, thank you so much for all that extremely helpful information. I really, really enjoyed your talk about everything that you need to know about the Hatchie National Wildlife Preserve. So we'll go ahead and have you answer some of the questions here. The first one is from Melanie on Facebook. It said, you mentioned planting crops to replace acorns. What happened to the natural supply of acorns?
Over the years, I guess even after World War II, there was a big boom, economic boom throughout the country. And the Mississippi River bottoms, they're very fertile from where sedimentation over the years have been dropped. And so these lands were cleared. They were cleared for agricultural purposes. They were cleared to produce food and crops for the United States and for the country. So we lost those bottomland hardwoods. The land was converted to agriculture, taken, the timber was harvested, and then the land was cleared and put into agricultural crops. and we've lost a tremendous amount of that. So we're trying to, that's what we're trying to do is kind of compensate a little bit for that loss, habitat loss. But it's just been over the years. And then in the 70s, the 60s and 70s, there was a lot of habitat that was converted to agricultural crop fields.
Okay. And William on Zoom asks, what are some of the obstacles standing in the way of current conservation efforts?
Some of our obstacles with the Fish and Wildlife Service, just to be open, is the budget. Throughout the since 2010, we've had declining budgets or flat budgets, which really is not keeping up with the cost of living or inflation rates. And with that, they've had to make decisions on where to best put that money and just to meet the priority needs. And Hatchie is a priority, which we work in a complex. So I have shared resources with other refuges throughout West Tennessee. So we're getting everything done and accomplishing our goals the best that we can. But that's one of the biggest conservation obstacles is budgets. Unfortunately, that kind of controls how much work we can get done and how many employees we can hire. We filled those gaps basically working out of our own budgets to hire temporary interns, temporary tractor operators to kind of fill those gaps. And then I just public awareness. A lot of folks, we're seeing a lot of trends throughout the United States of populations leaving, and unfortunately leaving places like Haywood County, which is heavily agricultural. They're headed to the cities, and there's regions being created, say Nashville, and the Atlanta area, that they're calling those mega regions, or the growth. People are moving to those areas and leaving the conservation areas, agriculture areas. So people are kind of losing that touch with the natural landscape. They're losing that. We're declining. And now the pandemic has changed things. We're seeing some folks, things were closed, so people were going back to the hunting and back to the fishing. But the trend is we're losing our outdoor enthusiasts just through population trends. So we're kind of getting a little out of touch with our conservation. Those are probably our two biggest obstacles.
Okay. And then great question. I was actually going to ask this one if nobody did, but how can the public get involved in helping preserve and improve the refuge?
I would say come visit the refuge. That's one of the biggest ways you can get involved. Show your support and come down and use the refuge. The refuge is here for the public. It's anything wildlife dependent. Now, refuges are technically closed first. It's a wildlife first situation because it's a wildlife refuge, so to speak. But we do allow those wildlife dependent recreation, such as the hunting and the fishing and the outdoor photography and environmental education. I would say to get involved, come to the refuge, learn it, see it, become passionate about it. It's I truly feel we are blessed to be in Haywood County. We've got a lot of good folks that really love Hatchie National Wildlife Refuge, and in a lot of ways are very involved. Join the Friends group. The Friends group, the president is a Haywood County resident, and they're scattered. We have Friends members from the Reelfoot National Wildlife Refuge, Chickasaw National Wildlife Refuge, Lake Isom, and Lower Hatchie. And this Friends group is advocates for the refuge, whether they advocate for through politicians or just volunteer projects, coming out and helping. And I would say that would be the best ways. Just come to the refuge, get involved with it.
And are there any specific projects for the refuge that you'd like to see happen, like anything that's coming up in the works, or something that you have kind of envisioned that you'd like to see happen on the refuge?
I would say this summer we actually have two major projects. Windrow Road, we've got some money coming in from the Federal Highways Transportation Project. We're going to do some gravel work on Windrow Road, but we're also going to, if you notice, the river's naturally meandering. Have you driven down Windrow Road recently? The road's within about 15 feet of the river now. So we've got some of those projects that we're going to have to move the road over just a little bit we're not going to impede the river in any way, but we're just have to keep balancing our road a little bit as it naturally meanders. And then another project is windrow impoundments. We're going to rework those levees. Those levees constantly are getting flooded and washing out. So we're going to rework those. So we can continue to manage for waterfowl and for the habitat in that area. We use that field to flood and to hold water. And it's a beautiful area that the public can use and see. I would say we're pushing now. I've put in for new projects. Over the last few years, we've done a lot of projects around O'Neill Lake. We've got some new signage up. We've got some new informational signs, trail signs about different species of birds and waterfowl and grasses and trees, and that the public can come out and kind of follow this trail and follow it along. We're implementing kind of like a QR code on these trail signs where you can scan the code on your phone and the video will pop up explaining bottomland hardwoods or waterfowl impoundments or this certain species of bird or tree. So that's some of the things I'd like to see. We're going to continue that trend of enhancing. That's one of our goals, is to enhance public use and public awareness of the refuge. And O'Neill Lake is such a perfect place to do that. That's where most of our visitors come to. I've put in a couple of projects for kind of a covered pavilion to put here beside the contact station to where we can have environmental education groups. We work with Memphis Kids in Nature. That hopefully soon we'll get back to resuming those programs through the pandemic. But that will allow us to have a place to get in out of the sunshine, to stay, spaced out, to be open, and so we can continue those programs. And we've also talked about maybe a little amphitheater staging area that may help us to educate the public in. So those are some main projects that I'd like to see to continue to push and enhance the visitor aspect and the environmental education, but also really is to keep our refuge operating like it needs to in terms of migratory waterfowl and migratory birds.
Awesome. And then what is your favorite animal species, or it could be a plant species that you would see on the Hatchie Refuge personally?
Well, I always tell everybody I have a background in forestry. I love trees, and trees. I'm a tree guy, kind of. We have a lot of birding activities here, and I'm like, well, I'm a tree guy, so I'm not real good at finding those out, so I have to rely on other folks. But I'm learning, and so trees are really dear to my heart. That whole bottomland forest, just walking through there, just taking a walk through some of our trails and stuff, that it brings a sense of peace, and it especially during the times that we've been through. And trees are so important. Carbon sequestration is a topic, climate change, wherever you're at on that. The trees will, they filter that carbon out, and they produce oxygen and stuff, and they store carbon. They're just very important. My favorite, probably, animal species, that's a good one. I being down here on the Hatchie River, and that's a tough one. I don't really have a favorite one, but I will say I do have a love-hate relationship with beavers, the American. They're so important to this area in terms of creating habitat. Out in the woods and stuff, they use their techniques to dam up water, to back water up into certain areas, and they're creating ecosystems. They may go in there and deaden 200 acres of trees. Oh, and it breaks my heart being a tree guy. But what it does is it's creating an emergent marsh for another type of habitat, kind of creating a cycle for other wildlife species and bird species to use. So I'd have to say, I'm not going to call them my favorite, but they are the most impactful on my daily life. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say they're quite the successful architects for being a different species other than humans. So they're very impressive. But I totally understand, being a tree person, that would be kind of heartbreaking.
They are. They're so persistent too. Like, we cleaned out 3 or 4 water control structures today that they were trying to clog up to keep the water, and we need to move the water through the system, but they want to hold on to that water. So I'd have to say that the beaver is probably the most impactful in my life. That's for sure.
Oh, and another question that came in, does the conservation plant new trees, or are the Hatchie National Wildlife Preserve, did you guys plant new trees, for instance, to replace the oak trees that produce acorns for waterfowl?
We do. 2 winters ago, we actually took a agricultural field that has always kind of been marginal and not very productive in terms of agricultural crops. We planted that. It was around 73 acres. We replanted that back into trees. In that area, if you're local and want to go see that area, it's over off Shep Road, on the far west side of the interstate, part of the refuge. We planted those in nuttalls, cherry barks. I believe there was some pecans in there, and there was probably some persimmon that are more that the persimmon and pecan are beneficial to the wildlife as well as the acorns. So we've planted that in trees, and if you go there now, you can kind of see them in the grasses. So yes, we do plant those, and we have a pretty active forest management. Back in 2011, we also harvested some loblolly pines that were planted to hold some of the areas that were washing off. There were hillside farms in the past. Those trees were planted to hold from erosion. And then we did harvest those because there were oak trees and things coming in underneath them. Loblollies were kind of on their northern range, not necessarily a native tree species. So we had those harvested, and that area is over in the Hillville. And you can see now it's come up in thousands of trees per acre, and that's promoting an oak hardwood forest.
Okay. And then another question on Facebook is, how easy is it to access the river for canoes and kayaks?
It is. It's pretty easy. We have the 2 boat ramps that access the Hatchie River. One is the Big Eddy, and that's on the far east side. If you look back at that public use regulation brochure, that's on the far east. And then we have the Highway 76 boat ramp. That's 17 miles downriver from Big Eddy, so it would be a full day float. I do have a couple of projects if we should ever get any infrastructure money, to create a couple of new boat ramps on the Hatchie River. We'd do that in partnership with the state of Tennessee, to kind of break that mileage up to, say, a half-day float or something. But those areas are accessible through county roads and through refuge roads.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I looks like that's just about it for questions. One thing that I would love to go over really quick before we wrap up is the West Tennessee Delta Heritage Center received a grant last year from Humanities Tennessee to write a publication, and one of the projects that we work specifically on is nature of West Tennessee. And so we worked with we came up with what we call the West Tennessee Nature Journal, but all the species within the Nature Journal, which I'm going to share quickly with you guys, are found along the Hatchie or at the Hatchie National Wildlife Preserve. So if you guys are interested, they have a few copies there at the refuge, and we also have some copies here at the museum. Please stop by. The publications are free, and they go over everything, like some detail about each of the species, and then they have different I guess fun facts and assignments for things. It includes a coloring book, and kind of challenges you to go out into nature and to not find and handle or anything. Please stay away from the species, but to observe and to appreciate the amazing species that are out there. So again, stop by the museum and stop by the preserve and pick up one of your very own West Tennessee Nature Journals. It's a lot of fun, especially for people like myself and like Brian who love nature. So I'm going to go ahead and just make sure. It looks like we've got all the questions asked and answered. Brian, again, thank you so much for joining us tonight and informing us about all of the amazing things that you guys do. And I, for one, love going there. I think that's my daughter's favorite place for anything woodsy around West Tennessee. So
thank y'all. Thank you for having me. It's been a great pleasure to be with y'all this evening.
Absolutely. Well, everyone, thank you so much for joining us either on Zoom or on Facebook Live for this month's exhibition exchange. And hopefully we'll see you again next month. Take care. Bye.